Thanks for joining us for the Communicators. Well, Washington, D.C. was the site of the 2010 Government 2.0 Expo, an event attended by experts interested in using technology to bring a more open government to citizens. They're also interested in selling technology to the government. Well, in this edition of the Communicators, you'll meet some of the attendees, starting with Tim O'Reilly. He's the founder of O'Reilly Media, which co-produces the event.
Mr. O'Reilly, when you set these conferences and expos up, what's the purpose?
There's a technology revolution happening right now in the private sector with cloud computing, mobile phones, all delivering amazing capabilities into the hands of citizens. And government technology also needs a refresh. We need to rethink how we deliver services to citizens. But technology revolutions are also an opportunity to rethink the whole enchilada, so to speak. Everything we take for granted about what we're delivering with government. So I've been trying to tell a story about government acting as a platform provider as opposed to acting like an application provider. And what does that actually mean? If you're not a technologist, that might be a little confusing. But there's a really great example right now, which is the Apple iPhone. Because the old model of delivering a smartphone looked a lot like government procurement. Some smart people get in a room, they think through the features, they give it to you, and that's the end of the story. And it either succeeds or fails. Apple did something different. They did create a fabulous phone with the first generation iPhone, but then they turned it into a platform for developers. So now the 15 or 20 applications that Apple wrote themselves have been joined by nearly 200,000 applications written by people who don't work for Apple. And that seemed like a wonderful metaphor for how government programs ought to work. And the best government programs do work. When government acts like a platform provider, we get more for less because it's investing in technology that enables the private sector. That's a lot of what Vivek Kundra, the federal CIO, is trying to do with the data.gov initiative. How do we turn the government's data assets into a more robust, scalable platform so that we can replicate the kinds of things that we see, for example, with weather data, where the government is not in the business of delivering the weather data to you. It's your radio station, your TV station, various people on the internet or on the mobile phone, but the government collects the data because, hey, it's expensive to put up weather satellites. And they bootstrap that operation. Similarly, the GPS system, which President Reagan made open for civilian use in 1983. I made the comment this morning that President Reagan was really the guy who enabled new services like the hip service Foursquare, because, hey, without that decision, we wouldn't have those private sector investments.
So is it just certain or specific areas of the government that are open to this idea of allowing people to develop platforms to make more information available, or are some agencies slow to coming to that kind of philosophy?
I think in general, every technology revolution has its leaders and its laggards. And there's no question that there are some new ideas here. There are a lot of people who are very excited, many of them here at the Gov2O Expo. But there are also many people who are on the fence. There are many people who are doubtful. But if you look at the history, for example, of the personal computer, one of the biggest computer companies of the day was headed by Ken Olsen, Digital Equipment Corporation. He said, the PC is just a toy. Guess what happened to digital? When these things are coming, change happens whether you like it or not. And there really is an opportunity for forward-thinking agencies, forward-thinking members of Congress, forward-thinking government officials at all levels, state, local, to take this opportunity to cut costs out of government. When you look at something like cloud computing, you can literally save millions of dollars. We are in tight times. So this morning when I asked Randy Levin, the CTO of the city of Los Angeles, what was the benefit of switching to cloud email apps? She said, well, we save $5 million. And I said, well, what do you do with that $5 million? And she said, we get to survive, our current budget crisis. And, there are so many opportunities in the cheap technology that has come on stream. And we need to broaden our definition of COTS, common off-the-shelf software, to include some of these new cloud technologies, because the costs of things that used to be very expensive are coming down radically, and there's a huge opportunity for the government to take advantage of that. And also, as I said, by designing programs correctly, you can actually get more for less.
Do you find that since you've started putting these forums together, that environment is changing, that interest in trying to get more people involved in this process is changing?
Absolutely. I think something like this really benefits from the kind of visibility that we're able to give to innovators, because if you make innovators into heroes, at some point, people start to pay attention. Other people want to be like them. It's a little bit like the old "Be Like Mike" campaign. When you see that Dustin Haisler, the CIO of the tiny city of Manor, Texas, has built this amazing web presence, doing all these cool things with technology. A big city says, "Wow, why can't we do that?" And so, for example, I'm on the board of a nonprofit called Code for America, which is trying to get young technologists to come work in cities, based loosely on the idea of Teach for America, to build the next generation of civic software. I think there are enormous opportunities for technologists to make a difference in government. I think that people are getting inspired to do that, and I think the opportunity is accelerating.
What do you think it then, if this keeps going, means for the consumer of this information?
Well, when you build platforms, you almost always get unexpected results. So when the Air Force put up the GPS satellites, they didn't expect things like Foursquare check-ins, I'm at this restaurant, or I'm at this event, but those kinds of innovative applications are possible. We now see the explosion of turn-by-turn maps, which it used to be in dedicated GPS devices, and now it's on your everyday smartphone. People are walking around looking at Google or Bing maps and following their current location. That's remarkable, how democratized that technology has been. This is situational awareness that was once, this sort of ideal for the military, and now it's in the pocket of every citizen, or potentially. And the other thing that I think I want to mention here, I think there are some really big opportunities in healthcare. And there's been a lot of misunderstanding, I think, because of all the politicization of the healthcare debate about what health IT means and what the opportunities are. I think probably the average citizen imagines the next generation of government health IT as something like the Borg in Star Trek, where all the medical system is going to be consumed by the government. But if you actually look at what's happening and the actual design of programs, the Office of the National Coordinator, which was started by George Bush actually, and the funding that was given, greatly expanded by the Recovery Act, is really a brilliant exercise in what I'm calling government as a platform. Because you have on the one hand these projects. One is called NIN Direct, National Health Information Network Direct, and the other HHS Connect. One of them for connecting institutions, the other for connecting doctors and patients and doctors with each other. And they're incredibly small, focused software projects, a little bit like, say, a web server. It just does one simple thing well, and it's about the exchange of medical records. It doesn't actually deliver the records to doctors or patients. It just enforces the communications between systems that do that delivery. And the marketplace of providers is left to do that. And then the recovery bill puts in place a fairly large pot of money, $20 billion or more, in direct incentive payments to doctors, to hospitals, to medical practices, to labs, to actually enable what they're calling meaningful use of electronic medical records. So it's this really interesting opportunity where the government on one hand is providing some mechanisms, they're providing some incentives, and they're saying to the private sector, go to town, see what inventive things you can do. And we're already seeing a revolution in medical information interchange that goes way beyond the past. Just as a quick for instance, I have in my pocket a little device I'm carrying all the time. It's from Philips Electronics, Philips Direct Life. It's a little motion sensor, and it reports my daily activity. Using this thing, I've actually lost about 15 pounds in the last year, and I have a scale at home. When I step on it, it reports my weight It's called from a company called YThings, and it links automatically into Google Health or Microsoft Health Vault, where I also can have my prescriptions sent, my medical records. So this is starting to happen at a consumer level, and we're getting new kinds of devices, new kinds of monitoring, so there are innovations happening in healthcare because of this platform-like infrastructure.
Now that was conference organizer Tim O'Reilly. Now, while most attendees come from the U.S., they come from all over the world, and some come from as far away as Australia. Senator Kate Lundy is a member of the Australian Federal Parliament and part of an effort to expand broadband availability throughout Australia.
Senator Lundy, does the term Gov 2.0 mean the same in Australia as it does here in the United States?
Look, I think it does. One of the issues with Gov 2.0 is people understand the internet now, they're using the internet, but saying Gov 2.0 makes them relate it to what the business of government, what governments do and what the role government has in their lives. So I think the terms actually helps people understand what we're all about.
Is there a desire for those that you serve with and government to make it more transparent via technology?
Yeah, we have a top-level policy commitment to making data more accessible by all Australians, and also to have a default position of publishing government information and having to make a case not to. So that's a big switch and comes on the back of some legislative change that has been through the Senate just recently.
Such as?
We had two acts of Parliament, the Freedom of Information Amendment Act and the Information Commissioner Act. Both of those acts change things. The FOI Act provides for a new objective that makes the default position of government information to be published unless a case is made. The Information Commissioner Act puts in place a new statutory position which will have overarching responsibility, whole of government responsibility for information management, storage, accessibility and systems to manage that information. So it's a new high-level position that will help us put in place the Gov 2.0 policies that we want.
Who were the drivers of those legislation and who's the drivers within government to make this happen?
Yeah,
does it work top-down?
Look, in Australia it's a bit of both. It's top-down, the political commitment is there, but there's also a groundswell of people who care about government, who want government to be more participatory, who want to be able to engage more effectively. So it's a combination of political leadership and grassroots activism. That's not a bad place to be when moving in a new direction, and it's helped Australia leap ahead in some respects in achieving what we'd like to out of Gov 2.0 and making that transformation to more engaging, more interactive government.
Is there a quantitative way to look at how the residents of Australia have responded to this? Are they taking advantage of getting this information and digesting it?
Yeah, we've got some new websites that show that the interest in the changes is really strong. A number of our collecting institutions, our cultural institutions, are doing things like, well, one of them is placing some of their images on Flickr. That's a world first. Our National Library has got a crowdsourcing initiative underway which allows people to help go through character recognition of old newspapers that are scanned in as part of their archive and their collection. So the people out there are just helping with this work. They're not being paid, they're all volunteers and you know, I think contributing an enormous amount. And also australia.gov.au is a new citizen portal that allows citizens to share as much of their personal information as they want. And the government responds with higher and higher degrees of support and services tailored for them. But they're early days, so no, we don't have a quantitative analysis of how citizens are using the new services, but I think that will come as investment increases.
There's a discussion in your country about broadband.
Yes.
And how much of the country is getting it. Could you encapsulate the nature of that discussion as it stands?
Yeah, look, I can. The National Broadband Network is a huge public policy commitment, up to $43 billion worth of public funding. We've just had an implementation study completed by McKinsey that was released publicly, which is great. And we now know that our fibre to the home or fibre to the premises network will extend to 93% of the population. So that's 100 megabits per second to 93%. 3% wireless terrestrial, and then the final 4% through the satellite, and they envisage the new Ka band, so less problems with the satellite service. It's a wholesale only open access network that will be independently regulated. This will transform Australia and will effectively close the digital divide. For me and my government, that means our investment in Gov 2.0 and online services, we know will not exacerbate the digital divide because of this national broadband investment.
There's a discussion within this country about the same issue, and some to the degree of how much government should be involved in this, and why not let the private sector take up as far as bringing out broadband to more rural areas of our country.
Yeah.
Does that relate to what?
Yeah, we've been there. We've been in that place. We've had that debate. And in fact, one of the reasons the government is able to justify and make the case for this national broadband investment with the fibre network is because our previous dominant incumbent telecommunications carrier was able to game the regulations so much that they suppressed the proliferation of broadband. We didn't have cross-platform competition and all sorts of other problems. So in a way, it's kind of ironic. That underinvestment in telecommunications infrastructure in Australia created the preconditions that allowed us to be able to proceed with, I think, one of the most elegant telecommunications policies designed to close the digital divide. I'm very proud of that, and I think that this overbuild with this fibre will set Australia up to have one of the most robust, future-proof fibre-based networks in the world.
On the political front, is this just an effort that is supported mainly by your party, or is this a bipartisan effort?
Well, it was bipartisan up to about a month ago. We're heading into an election year, and the Conservative Party in Australia has decided that no, they won't support this particular initiative. So if there's a change of government, which I will be working towards the fact make that not happen, the broadband network is at risk. I think this is an unfortunate development, but one that I think reflects their tendency to support the incumbent telco, the monopolistic approach of the past, where clearly the market has failed. And we tested the market before embarking on this process. The market was not able to deliver the sort of solution that the Australian people were clamouring for.
Australia is such a diverse country in land and in its rural areas.
Yeah.
How do you effectively bring fibre to all of those separate areas?
Well, the population of Australia is quite densely gathered around the coastlines. My hometown, Canberra, is the largest inland city at 350,000 people. So the implementation study did a very detailed geospatial analysis of what the network would look like. And it was that implementation study that determined beyond what we thought. We thought 90%. The implementation study, McKinsey believed that it's cost effective to extend that to 93% of the population. So we're taking independent advice. We've published that independent advice and we'll be following it.
Part of the discussion about this network was about content as far as filtering is concerned. What's the nature of that discussion?
Well, my government's policy is still to proceed with an internet filter. The legislation hasn't been debated yet. That's something that we're still considering, and the minister responsible is still consulting with the ISP sector and industry stakeholders. So it's very controversial. I've blogged about this matter, and I'd encourage people to go and check out my blog for my views on this. But in essence, it's a controversial policy that the government is yet to legislate on.
How would the filter work?
Well, the details of the filter are not available because the legislation hasn't been prepared. That's the subject of the sort of discussions that are currently going on with the industry.
But are there free speech issues and as well as the ability to bring content that factor into this discussion?
Yeah. One of the big issues is the principle of the open internet. It's something I certainly care deeply about, and it's part of the nature of the controversy around the filter proposal. A lot of people feel very strongly that to apply a mandatory filter in the way that's proposed offends that principle of the open internet. And on the other hand, we've got many advocates saying, well, if you can, we have a responsibility to block the type of content that's targeted with the filter.
I don't know how closely you follow issues in our country, but one of the big discussions in the telecommunications world is net neutrality.
Yes. Especially
along the issue of the reclassification of some broadband services in order to bring more control over these issues. Do those kind of discussions take place in Australia's government?
Look, they're starting to, I think, in the context of the discussion around the operation of the filter and the whole Gov 2.0. I think it's a discussion that probably will develop in its sophistication. It's very raw and emotional debate at the moment, as you would understand. But I think that the sophistication of that conversation is developing as more information comes to light about what happens to internet content now. What are the policies of the various search engines? Who takes down what, and how do the existing laws operate? So it's always a little more complex than at first glance, but something that we're still talking about. And as I don't want to back away from this, it's a very controversial issue in Australia at the moment.
As far as broadband, would you offer our country some advice from given your country's experience about our efforts on bringing broadband to the more areas of the United States?
Yeah, look, there's a point at which it doesn't make business sense to invest in a really brand new high bandwidth network. So where is the right point for government intervention? And we've seen policy. We've tried them in Australia where subsidising telcos to roll out a network is just providing more money to build, but then to sustain a competitive pricing regime on the back of that build, you really need to look at industry structure. And this is why having an open access wholesale only fibre to the home network doesn't interfere with the competition that will then function at the retail level. But the independently regulated wholesale price really governs the structure and drives that competition at the retail level. And you need those two elements. You need the infrastructure in place, consider a subsidy there, but it's really the structure of the market and how you can create competitive tension where it matters for consumers.
And that was Senator Kate Lundy, a member of the Australian Federal Parliament, talking about broadband availability. Next, we hear from Carolyn Lawson. She works for the Chief Information Officer in California. In this interview, she tells us about using technology not only to deliver information to residents, but also to save the state money.
Carolyn Lawson, what do you do for the state of California?
I'm the Deputy Director of the Technology Services and Governance Division, which does a couple of things. We manage the Technology Services Board, which is a legislated board to manage our state data center. But also I work with constituent groups, primarily the Webmaster User Group. We've got 500 webmasters across the state of California who are doing some really cool new and innovative things with the web, finding ways to use the tools that are openly available and free to save the state a ton of money.
Can you give an example of how that works?
Absolutely. Our Webmaster User Group has a meeting once every couple of months. In every meeting, we demonstrate something that we found that's free. One of the last things we demonstrated was Widgetbox. We were showing how you could build a widget through combining things like the Twitter that's on EDD, our Employment Development Department, their press releases, their YouTube, and dropped it together in a little widget, stuck it on the website. Within 2 months, we had 2 million impressions. People wanted to know how to get their checks. They wanted information about how the laws were changing. They wanted the instructional videos, and it was dropped all over the place. The other thing that's really important is that Twitter feed is actually being run like a help desk. So EDD, if you are unemployed in the state of California and you have to apply for unemployment benefits and you've never done it before, you can tweet us and we'll give you instructions. You can tweet us and ask questions and we'll help you out with that.
So before that, to get that kind of information out, you would have to print paper and send it to them, or how would that work?
Print paper, call a phone line where you wait for the next available operator, search around on a website if the information was up there. So we've really changed the way that we use technology in order to meet the demand. The state of California has a 12.6% unemployment rate right now. We have 3 furlough days a month, so our staff time is decreasing, our need is increasing, and we're turning these kind of tools to fill in that gap.
As far as changing the way you operate because of technology, was it a survival mode to save money, or was there thought within that, a more streamlined process was possible?
No, it was just, we had an immediate need. How do we do this? What do we do now? I mean, the wave is coming. The wave was coming and we needed to know what to do. So we just figured things out.
As far as how people, constituents of California, depend on these services, what's their relationship to how they're using this technology? Do most like it? Do you get complaints that it's confusing? And if that's the case, how do you help them through it?
We do get some complaints, although not very many. I would say 1 or 2 a month. But we help them through it because we have a phone line they can call. And they call the phone line to complain and then find out what to do. So we're not that worried about it. What we have noticed is, for example, the Employment Development Department now does over 80% of their transactions online. 5.6 million in the last year online. saving the state a ton of money.
As far as those within government itself, were they willing to make these changes, or were they resistant at first to let technology take a lot of the responsibility away from the previous processes that were used?
Well, I think people are really happy to find some new way of doing something. But we don't have a lot of money. We have a lot of stress on our systems. There is an interesting innovation tolerance now that wasn't there before, because we have to do something. We have to serve. We're here to serve. We have to do something. So the creative ideas are getting more speed than they would have in the past.
Talk a little bit about, I read a couple of things about your office and how it works, the role of cloud computing.
The state of California has done several interesting things in cloud computing. One of them is in our ARA reporting. We went immediately to Amazon. Instead of going through building it in the state data center first and then moving it someplace else, or what are we going to do? The reason for that was we had competing priorities. We had a federal mandate to get this up. We had the priority of doing other work in our data center, including working on some of the EDD major systems. So turned to the cloud. It's worked great. We've done some interesting things too with bringing out websites. For example, the business.ca.gov, which is a new website from the Governor's Office of Economic Development. We had to bring that up within a month. So we have got a cloud provider. It's a hosted solution. We use open source, and up and running. It's great. We have several other initiatives going on. There's eHub, which is our email scrubbing for virus spam protection. That's in the cloud. We have a bid out on the street right now for hosted email to take a look at what the options are for that. We're hoping to get some good responses. We don't know where that one's going to land yet, but we're pretty excited about it as one of our consolidated solutions. So there's a lot of movement toward the cloud, but we're not moving everything.
As far as not moving everything, or let's start with the process of moving. Are you concerned about privacy, especially when you're moving some of these systems over to a cloud site?
Of course, and that's why we're not moving everything. Is we're taking it slowly. We're looking at everything in the same way we would as if it was not a cloud solution. We're coming at it from the perspective of you rip off the label. Cloud really means nothing. It's a hosted solution. It's another way of doing business. It's not magic. It's not mystical. You have the same requirements analysis you have to do. It's not always about money. Sometimes security is more important. Sometimes privacy is more important. Sometimes access to data is more important. So you have to evaluate where the important pieces are and then what the best solution is to meet that need.
As far as that is concerned, what's your role? And tell us about the team you work with. Who do you make these decisions along with?
Actually, right at the moment, that's not my role. When I was the CIO of the Public Utilities Commission, I, as a CIO, made some of those decisions for the commission. But the state CIO's office, where I work right now, that is not my role to make those decisions.
How do you determine if the way that you've moved some of these processes over to the cloud, or the way you're using technology to handle some of these processes, are successful? How do you gauge that?
Metrics. Just the same way that we would gauge any other type of implementation. What are you trying to get out of it? What's the outcome you need? What is your success parameters? And then how close are you to meeting those? Same thing. It's really no different whether it's cloud or free or paid for or anything else.
That was Carolyn Lawson with the state of California. Now, you'll meet more of the Government 2.0 Expo attendees over the next few months. But if you want to watch this or other Communicators programs, you can find them on our website at cspan.org.